Oh, yeah.
That should carry the day, Senator.
Okay.
And I'll give you both 45, 30, 15, and 5
Okay, we're starting to go live on our different destinations here, so.
Okay.
someone
What do you want me?
It's okay. Maybe if you want to put it on the floor.
Yep, I could do that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Great. Cool. We're here. We're ready.
All right.
So Brad, for the open, should I go in on a tight shot?
So how's the campaign trail?
'Cause
It's
we don't
really a
really
lot
see.
better than I ever imagined it could be.
Yeah.
Because you have these kind of conversations, you know, every single day
Mm-hmm.
with people who are hurting, but they are willing to tell their truth.
Yeah.
And they really want to engage in ways I have not seen in past campaigns.
Yeah.
People get how the import of this,
Mm-hmm.
and so, and then folks have been really receptive to sort of my message, which isn't just the policy. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lot about the culture of our country and where we're going to be, and the fact that we've stopped. I just feel like we're in a period where we just aren't. We have a crisis of empathy in our country. We're not seeing each other even, seeing the struggles of people that live on our block. Even. Think that their struggle is separate from ours, but
Yeah.
it's just not.
Yeah.
So I just see this, people yearning, especially because he's so mean.
Yeah.
I think that it's like giving a better shot at people who lead with kindness and empathy and the values that I've always thought were so critical. So it's been just an affirming experience to me.
Yeah.
Even when I have Republicans come up to me in airports who say, I don't agree with anything you said, but I'm grateful you're talking about this and this and this. So I just think this is a moment where we need to start talking about what are our common virtues, and are we living up to them?
Yeah. 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 These are really unique
1 minute.
political times
Yeah.
that we're in.
And so I see an opportunity here in the same way that I think my heroes, which were civil rights activists, were able to take a moment of where they wanted to change laws, but also expand the country's sort of moral imagination at the same time, which is, I think, a really great sort of two-step.
Yeah. Well, this is a make or break moment. I mean, if we don't figure this out, then I'm gonna start joining the preppers. No pressure, man. But
No, what we
30
do,
seconds.
one of the things I always say
Real
is,
30 seconds.
Okay.
one of the things I always say is election can't be about electing a savior. We
Yep.
are the ones.
no, that's right.
Yeah. 15.
WFP staff. Here, this thing is buzzing. I'm just gonna throw it to you. Oh, great catch.
Pretty good.
See.
Did you play some sport in your younger days
5.
involved catching?
Phone catching, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome to our live interview series as part of WFP Decision 2020. We want to thank everyone who's streaming across the country, our members, our state chapters, our super volunteers. My name is Maurice Mitchell. I'm the National Director of the Working Families Party. We are live with WFP members, organizational allies, watching from across the country for our interview with Senator Cory Booker. A major shout out to our media partners at ACT TV. And we also have today's Spanish translation. Para escuchar en español, por favor, llame al 605-313-5111. Código de acceso es 377569.
Impresionante.
Gracias, mi amigo. Before we get started, I want to talk about the WFP 2020 endorsement process. For those of you who are familiar with the Working Families Party, we're the independent grassroots party building an America for the many, not the privileged few. If you want to throw down with us, just text WFP 2020 to 738-674. That's WFP 2020 to 738-674. Now, we're endorsing a candidate because we believe the best way to beat Donald Trump is to nominate someone with a bold, transformative vision of a real and sustained justice. In this process, we're modeling the type of democracy we believe we all deserve. Over the course of 2 weeks, we're asking 6 presidential candidates questions from Working Families Party members and allies across the country. After all the candidates have taken your questions, we'll move on to the vote in September. Here's how this is all going to work. The Working Families Party National Committee, which includes representatives of our state chapters, national progressive and movement leaders, will get half of the total vote. WFP members and grassroots supporters will also receive an equal share of the votes. The supporter and membership vote will be held online. After Labor Day, we'll have an affirmation period where supporters can go online and affirm Working Families Party values and their willingness to vote. People will affirm, and then they'll cast their votes in September. The endorsement vote will be conducted using ranked choice voting. Here's how ranked choice voting works. Instead of just casting one vote for your favorite candidate, everyone who votes will be able to rank their candidate preferences from first to last. If no one's first choice gets more than 50% of the combined vote of WFP supporters and the National Committee, the bottom ranked candidate is eliminated and their votes are reallocated to those voters' second choice. This process continues until one of the candidates crosses the 50% threshold and wins. That's it. That's the process. If you want to be part of it and help decide who wins, then please again text WFP 2020 to 738-674. Now, please welcome Senator Cory Booker. And Senator Booker, you have your opening remarks. You have 3 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you very much. I want to thank WFP for having these forums. I want to thank you for your level of activism and engagement. There are folks in this country, in this organization, who in their communities are turning their outrage into a motivation to get out working and turning real worry into work. I was taught by leaders in my community that hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. And your activism right now, in my opinion, is the hope we have for our nation in these difficult and dark times, where so many people feel fear about the safety and security in their community, fear about ICE raids in their neighborhood, fear about how they're going to afford life-saving prescription drugs, fear about their family's well-being. And my focus on running, my focus on being in public life really is the same thing about my first office when I ran for a city council seat in the Central Ward of Newark, New Jersey. It's where I live now in communities of color. For 20 years, I've been battling it out, fighting for those who are too often left out, left behind, looked down upon in our political process. My entire career has been about running at problems people said couldn't be done and changing the paradigm and working with larger and larger coalitions that were able to create results that proved that we are a country that when we come together, stand together, and work together, we can do incredible things. So this, to me, is what this election is about. It's about, can we create the kind of grassroots movements and coalitions to make possible things that people say are impossible, to take on our most difficult challenges, and not only take them on, but to assert and grab the hope and possibility of our country that will only come through our common purpose and our common struggle.
Thank you, Senator Booker.
Thank you.
So let's get into it.
Yeah.
Right. So, first question. Our country and the world face a set of acute intersecting crises, from soaring inequality to a warming climate to mass migration to rising white Christian nationalism to existing and potential wars to eroding trust in governing institutions and democracy itself. Now, each of the candidates we're considering for endorsement has put forth ambitious plans to tackle at least some of these crises. Most, if not all, of these plans are sure to encounter considerable resistance from the Republican Party, of course, but also from people who call themselves moderate or centrist Democrats in the House and Senate, and from wealthy donors and powerful industries. So my question to you is, what really is your plan to take on that opposition?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that you posed the question that way, because a lot of folks think this election might turn on what your policy is on healthcare or housing, and I'm excited to talk to you about those issues. But I think we're at a moment in our country where what's going to decide the ultimate direction of this nation is what kind of movement we create. because we are a nation that has never seen change come from Washington. It wasn't a bunch of women getting together on the Senate floor, a bunch of men sitting together on the Senate floor saying it's time for women to get the right to vote, let's do it. No, that came from activism. It wasn't Strom Thurmond that came down to the Senate floor one day and said, let's give those Negro people some rights. No, it came from activism. As Frederick Douglass says, a power concedes nothing without a demand. Those who profess to favor freedom yet deprecate agitation are like those who want the rain without the thunder and the lightning. We have to bring the heat. We have to bring the light through creating mass movements in this country for justice and for change. That's how I've seen change happen in my community. That's how I've had the power to pass some big pieces of legislation, like finally, after decades of a criminal justice system that was built on mass incarceration, to finally get a larger bill passed that began the first overhaul of a system and rolling back mandatory minimums, 3 strikes you're out, and other things. And so my focus as a leader, and especially in Washington, is not going to be about one person in one office. If we make this election just about that, we will deflate any kind of movement for real change. This has to be a sustained effort at organizing, not around parties even, but organizing around our common values and our common virtues. I say around justice and opportunity for all. And the way we're going to do that is making sure that as soon as I'm elected president, we are turning back to the people and continuing to organize to create the kind of momentum to address these intersecting issues that we're talking about. I always talk about the need in this country for a revival of civic grace, for a more courageous empathy, to understand that this has got to be the unleashing the fierce power of love. Now, that sounds like, hey, Cory, what are you talking about? Well, I know that civil rights activists didn't beat Bull Connor by using his tactics and fighting him on his turf in his hateful way. They didn't bring bigger dogs and bigger fire hoses. But these artists of activism awoke the moral imagination of this country and unleashed newer coalitions, broader-based coalitions, around coalitions of multiracial, multi-religious, that were ultimately able to make change. We have no chance of making change unless we can begin to do that again. And so anybody who's our president, yeah, they must be a tactician in Washington trying to get things done. And I can tell you from using the power of my pen the things we're going to do. But if they forget that the power of the people is always greater than the people in power, and if they don't start focusing on getting folk woke and getting more people engaged and actually trusting grassroots movements like WFP, we're not going to get things done. And that's the way I'm going to lead.
Great. Thanks for answering that. And you mentioned in that response, you talked a little bit about your advocacy around criminal justice. So the second question kind of digs into that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So you've been a leader in the Senate on fighting mass incarceration, including a bill that aims to reduce the prison population by 50%. That's correct, right?
Yes.
Okay, so as president, how do you manage to do, how do you manage to operationalize such a dramatic decarceration of our prisons?
Well, look, it starts with all kind of prisons. Let's just expand what we understand right now. So we have a significant amount of people who are undocumented immigrants in private prisons right now. I wholly believe that we should not have private prisons in America and that these detention facilities are unnecessary. Stanford Law School released a report and said we can actually be more effective, cost taxpayers less, better uphold the laws of our country without doing these detentions. And so that's one way right away. Let's take that type of mass incarceration off the table. The second thing is the insanity of treating vulnerable populations and the needs of vulnerable populations with incarceration, jail and prison, and not mental health care and addiction. We're treating addiction, we're treating mental health problems in criminal justice through criminal justice system, which is just wrong and outrageous. And so I've got a much bigger plan to deal with those things that often are stigmatized in our country. But then we just got to get down to the understanding that in over-incarcerated communities like mine, as the only person in the United States Senate that lives in a low-income, below the poverty line, black and brown communities, I watch people getting churned into the criminal justice system for doing things that 2 of the last 3 presidents did. Let me give you a simple example. Most people don't know this, that in 2017, we had more marijuana arrests than all violent crime arrests in our country combined. That means we're giving people a life sentence. What do I mean by that? Not in prison, but once you get a criminal conviction in this country, you can't get a job at a fast food restaurant, you can't get a business license, you can't get a loan from a bank. we are using, as Michelle Alexander says, this new Jim Crow in a way that is disproportionately impacting black and brown communities, with today more African Americans under criminal supervision than all the slaves in 1850. This system is unjust, this system is costly, this system is a violation of our values and our virtues. And my end, I make no bones about this, I said this when I was campaigning for the United States Senate, and I've said this as mayor of the city of Newark, is we need to change this system and put ourselves on par with our industrial peers who don't incarcerate like we do. We are 5% of the globe's population, but 1 out of every 4 incarcerated people are in our nation. And women, the fastest growing group of incarcerated people, 1 out of every 3 incarcerated women on the planet Earth are in our country. That is going to end under my leadership. I've shown my ability to get things done already as a senator. Give me the power of the presidency, and we're going to tear down this system of mass incarceration.
Okay. Thank you for that. Now, I want to pivot to, so this is the Working Families Party 2020 sort of process that you've decided to rope yourself into. So now that you're here, I want to ask a question about the party and how you plan on interfacing with the party if you become our nominee. So the party is committed to building a mass, multiracial base of working people across the country who are organizing to recruit and elect candidates up and down the ballot on a program of transformative change. We have a track record of electing insurgent champions to office and translating those victories to the ballot box into real policy wins for working people. Now, increasingly, we want to support candidates who don't just see the WP as a valuable ally, but see the WP as a political home and banner under which they'll march. What does the Working Families Party mean to you, and how will your campaign relate to the Working Families Party if we endorse you?
So for me, endorsement or not, by the way, if I become president of the United States, this is a party that needs to have a seat at the table for shaping and crafting policy, especially because you've organized yourself on what I believe is the pressure point of what's gone terribly wrong in our society, where you see an elevation of corporate power. You see that from our Supreme Court decisions, Citizens United allowing massive amounts of dark money to corrupt our politics. You've seen it on anti-democratic decisions in the Supreme Court that are rolling back voting rights, gerrymandering, and more. We are seeing the ascendancy of corporate power, and unfortunately that means that individuals, working Americans, are seeing their lives warped and distorted, whether it's come from wage stagnations, the attacks on unions, the attacks on pathways to success like public education. All of these things to me come down to the issues that you all are focused on. And we've got to reshift our American policies back to focusing on what are the ideals that I know we were talking about your family beforehand, a nurse, an electrician. My family, my grandfather was an assembly line worker for Ford Motor Company back in the days where a union job wasn't being union busting or right to work states. We're sitting in Nevada, which is another all-out assault on union and organizing. But the idea in this country that workers shared in profits, that workers had pathways to prosperity and security, retirement security, healthcare security, and more, which was the vision for what this country was about. Mm-hmm. And so my way I do work is by bringing the people that are most affected by issues to the table to shape the policy. And it's important that I'm specific, so I'll give you one example of policy that I wrote as a senator. Most Americans do not realize that we live in a nation of rampant environmental injustice. You see it right now with the Newark water crisis. Well, most folks don't know that we have 3,000 jurisdictions in America where children have more than twice the blood lead levels of Flint, Michigan. We have a nation right now where Superfund sites, these most toxic sites, are on the ascendancy. I've been to Duplin County where corporate animal agriculture has these massive CAFOs with lagoons of pig waste that are sprayed on fields, polluting, in this case, black communities, minority and low-income communities where they can't even open their windows or hold their clothing on the lines. I've gone up into the mountains of Alabama and seen communities like Tallahassee or Uniontown, Alabama, that have corporations moving toxic sites right into neighborhoods where now families are told, don't eat the fruit from your trees. And by the way, the values of your land that you've been on since slavery now is decimated. And so what we did in crafting that legislation is we didn't just say, hey, I know everything. We brought affected communities and grassroots advocacy groups to the table to actually write the legislation with me. And so as the guy in the Senate that has been fighting for environmental justice, that founded the Environmental Justice Caucus in the Senate and has put forth the most broad-based environmental justice bill that I didn't write, that we wrote, These are the kind of ways that I'm going to be a president of the United States as well. We have to stay connected to community. It's why I never left the community that first elected me in the Central Ward of Newark, New Jersey, because I believe that the strength and the power of the people, as I said before, is greater than the people in power, but the wisdom, the insights are absolutely necessary so that those folks that you're saying, the big donors or the corporations, aren't writing the policy, where often you hear a really wonderful name of the bill, but the issue doesn't really empower the people. And let me give you a simple example to end with, which is that bill that I talked about, that justice bill, the environmental justice bill, local communities, one of the first things they said to me is, we want the power and the standing to sue the big cats, because right now we don't have that, to sue states and others that allow these environmental toxins into our community. It's about returning power to communities so they can stand up and fight against those interests that are growing more powerful under the politics of today. We need to balance the scales and return power to the people. And the way you do that is have people having a seat at the table when we're shaping policy.
Great. Thanks for that. And thanks for answering in a very substantive way. That's one of the differences you'll see in these conversations, unlike the debate stage where you get like 1 minute. We actually, our members want the substantive dialogue. So that brings me to, so we actually have folks who are calling in via live stream, some of our members and our activists, and we're going to move to a question. I want to introduce right now, we're going to go straight to our first call-in question from Ingrid Walker-Henry, Vice President of the Milwaukee Teachers Education Association. Go ahead, Ingrid. Oh, wait, hold on 1 second. I don't think we have the audio. So let's just, this is live.
Yeah, so these
There we go.
okay, oh, Ingrid, you're on.
There we go.
Okay. Senator Booker, you've been a staunch supporter of voucher and charter schools that systematically siphon public tax dollars, funding, and resources from children in public schools. You served with Betsy DeVos on the board of directors of the Alliance for School Choice, and as a mayor of Newark, you implemented an internal takeover of Newark public schools, allowing unaccountable and not transparent students. Will you say you've been wrong and renounce your past support of vouchers and charters, and will you say you support public schools, the only schools that welcome and serve every child? Working Family Party members, along with 3 million members of the NEA, want to know.
Well, I'm grateful with the question.
And actually excited to give you an answer, because I read all this stuff about me that is just mostly not right. And the stuff in the question, actually, a lot of the facts aren't there. And so let me get you directly to the facts. As a guy that was living in projects in Newark and saw the anguish of people in my community who did not have access to great public schools. In fact, when I was mayor of Newark, our school system was under state takeover and one of the lowest performing schools in the state, even low performing for other low-income schools. And so if you want to know what I support, yeah, you can look to Newark, New Jersey. We didn't support vouchers. That is a lie and not one of the strategies we pursued. What we pursued was a system of public education that was inclusive, that had equity, and for every kid had an opportunity to go to a great school system. And so, yeah, that meant we supported a variety of different models. We supported high-performing public nonprofit charter schools, but we forced them, in fact, we closed a lot of them that were not serving the genius of our children, and actually had them participate in a much more inclusive environment. So now we have a one enrollment system. Charters can't cream from the best students. They have to take part in sort of a common practice we have in Newark, where even we share in our public school systems now, we share teacher training and cross-pollinate between different types of schools. If you talk to the superintendent now of our schools, they praise what's happening because the results speak for themselves. In Newark, New Jersey, we are now ranked the #1 school system in all of America for beat the odds schools, high poverty community going on to high performance. In Newark, New Jersey, our kids have seen 30% increases in graduation rates. In fact, if you're an African-American kid in our city, and I'm so proud of this because black kids are the majority of my city, majority of my school system, the kids, and often went to the lowest performing schools. You saw our kids, the chance of them going to a school that outbeat the wealthier suburbs went up almost 400%. So I'm proud of what we did in Newark, and if anybody wants to come after the schools that are educating my children in Newark, they're going to have to come through me. But I'll tell you what, when it comes to teachers, I got the endorsement of my state's largest teachers union twice because they know that I am a public school advocate. And in fact, not only am I a public school advocate, but if you look at my work in Washington, D.C., in the nearly 7 years I've been a senator, it's been fighting for teachers. It's been fighting to do the first thing we did in Newark, New Jersey, or one of the biggest things, which was to increase public school teachers' pay. And as President of the United States, these are my priorities. One is we are going to increase public school teachers' salaries. That profession is being disrespected. It's under attack. It's actually under attack by true privatization schemes in many states that are doing things to hurt the teaching profession, hurt schools, and undermine public education. I'm going to support public school teachers, not only raising their salaries, but forgiving their student debt. And not just public school teachers, because schools are communities of professionals. And so making sure we do the same things for nurses and school counselors and more. In addition to that, we've got to drive more resources to public schools in America. And the way we're going to do that is by making sure we're meeting the federal commitment that has never been met to fully fund special education. Now, those dollars would bring millions of dollars into school systems like mine in Newark or yours in Milwaukee and really help to get more resources for us to do what needs to be done. Public education is under attack. You mentioned Betsy DeVos, who I was on the Senate floor fighting against. And I tell you, I sat on a board with her, with other Democrats, looking for solutions, and I will never fault myself to trying to find solutions that work. But the solutions I know that work the best is when you support public schools and you protect them from attack and you support public school professionals. And the reason why I've gained such support from teachers around this country that are endorsing my campaign, as well as my state's teachers union, is because of the strategies that I have represented in the bills that I fought for in Newark, New Jersey. But I want to make one point that doesn't often come out in these kind of questions. We are asking our teachers and our schools to do things that they should not have to do. I know so many public school teachers that reach into their pockets to pay for things for their kids because they're showing up to schools with a lot of the challenges that kids out of poverty come to school with. Nutritionally unfit to learn, needing material things. And often these are teachers who are reaching in their pocket to pay for things when they're struggling to pay their own student debt. We have a system in our country that is having a struggling time dealing with challenges that we should be meeting because we think of education as K through 12, while our international competitors know that the most of brain development, about 80% of it is happening actually from the second or third trimester to the third or fourth year. So one of the other ways that we have to start under my presidency is expanding our understanding of what public commitments to the education of our children is. That means having universal prenatal care and prenatal access. I have a bill that even advocates for making sure we have doula care for low-income women. That means making sure that we have paid family leave in this country. Afghanistan and the Congo have paid family leave. We don't. That is deplorable. It means having affordable child care. It means having a universal preschool. Because if we don't prepare our kids to learn in the 21st century and begin to look at education really from second and third trimester all the way through college and apprenticeship programs, then we are really not preparing our kids to succeed. So I have been a champion of public education all my life, and especially for those kids that are too often left out of the equation, which are poor and low-income children and too often black and brown kids. The success we've had now having one of the best education systems in the country for low-income and black and brown kids, I am proud of the work we've done. And I'm proud of the fight that I've been bringing as a senator to defend public education and support it. And I will be the public education president that restores security to public education, gets resources to our professionals and to our schools so that we can again be the nation with the best education system on the planet Earth. And it's not just K through 12. It's really from the prenatal months all the way through to our kids getting to great careers.
Great. Thank you, Ingrid, and thanks, Senator Booker.
Thank you.
So next we're going to do another call-in question. I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Tim Merrill from Camden, New Jersey. Go ahead, Reverend.
Senator, this is Reverend Tim Merrill, a lifelong resident of Camden. And I want to ask you about a major issue affecting our community.
It involves one of your donors, Norcross's allies rewrote our state's corporate welfare law, resulting in the state issuing over $1 billion in tax credits, coming to a select group of companies that happen to be connected to Mr. Norcross and his family. All this done in the name of redeveloping our struggling city. But our residents are not reaping rewards from such lopsided development. The resources are exclusive to the waterfront and the downtown. Our leaders have not sought any community benefit agreements, and our neighborhoods continue to deteriorate. Now we've learned that they've constructed the law in a way that may have killed Camden's chance of having a full-service supermarket. Camden is a food desert where 2/3 of our residents do not have access to a supermarket where they can buy affordable, fresh, nutritious food. Mr. Norcross helped raise $470,000 for your campaign. Taking money from someone who would exploit the poor of our city in such a manner seems contrary to your stated ideals. Will you stand with the poor of Camden and give this money back?
Well, a couple of things. One is what I've been fighting for as a guy who's been in Newark and been down to Camden a lot. Dana Red, who was your former mayor, and I, she's like a sister to me, and we've fought for and gotten policies that have helped both Newark and Camden. And in Newark, we fought and won using some of these incentive bills that were passed through the legislature. We were able to get into Newark our first new supermarkets in decades to get rid of food deserts. We were able to get our first new hotels built in decades in our city, and we did community benefit agreements because I don't believe that gentrification is the solution to any of our problems. If you're coming to Newark, and I'm proud that my city council stood with me and the current mayor, we just had a big gentrification conference in Newark, that if you're going to build, you have to make the community part of the building. So in the same way as my philosophy, we brought people to the table and made sure that our kids had apprenticeship programs to get union jobs, that even our unions had to hire more African Americans and Latinos into their union, and we were able to work with them to make sure that 1/3 of the work, for example, on that first new hotel in our city, was going to actual Newark residents. We believe that in our city that there should be other community benefits, and actually you should be contributing to funds that help for the building of affordable housing. And we were very fortunate under my leadership to double the production of affordable housing, the rate of production in my city. So I'm proud of some of these same laws that may not be working in Camden, as you say, but they really helped us to attract development to the city of Newark and do it in a way that creates shared growth and shared opportunity. I don't agree with your characterization of how much resources this individual raised for my campaign, but I am proud to be running a campaign. In fact, I was the 5th United States Senator and said, we need to break this tie between the powerful and the rich and campaigns. And so before I even ran for the presidency, I said we are going to join the End Citizens United pledge and make sure that we're not taking corporate PAC money, to make sure we're not taking federal lobbyist money. And as I'm running this campaign, we've made sure that we're running this campaign directly tied to the grassroots, which is, I'm proud of our online fundraising, and that is the power and the resources that's driving this campaign. And we've doubled down on these commitments by saying we wouldn't take pharmaceutical executive C-suite dollars and the other kind of dollars that corrupt a campaign. A lot of the issues you're talking about, I know, are playing out in state politics, but I'm going to tell you the things that I can also do to help Camden succeed as the president of the United States. Number one is getting more power to communities to make choices over housing and other concerns that I know are still gripping Camden and Newark. And that's why our housing policy, which is very detailed and on CoryBooker.com, focuses a lot on community empowerment, whether it's giving people in the eviction process, as a former tenants' rights lawyer, the ability to have counsel and lawyers to support their advocacy, or giving renters, the same thing we give mortgage homeowners, an ability to deduct or to get a refundable credit from the government that gets more resources in the pockets of people in Camden and Newark and other places where folks are struggling for housing. My ag policy is very different than a lot of the things we've been seeing, which create often incentives that make people in communities like yours and mine be able to go to a bodega and find a Twinkie product cheaper than an apple. As a guy who has fought hard to end food deserts in communities like ours, that in Newark we show national models by turning entire city blocks into urban farms where folks coming home from prison and jail got jobs on those farms to help them get their feet underneath them and produce agricultural products for our community. These are the kind of things that are going to be in the ag bills of the future. We're incentivizing food systems that empower communities to end food deserts once and for all in our country. You are talking to a guy that if I'm elected President of the United States, I am a former mayor that's been connected to urban communities like yours and mine for my entire career. And my policies are all about empowering communities, economic empowerment, ending these broken food systems, making sure that development is not about gentrification, but about community empowerment and community control, dealing with environmental injustice, broken criminal justice systems. The issues that I've been fighting for as a mayor, the bills I've been pushing as a United States Senator, speak to the issues that are going on in Camden and hopefully give you assurances that if I'm President of the United States, our urban agenda will be back on the front burner to make sure that we are a country where anybody, anywhere, any zip code has the kind of empowerment they need to have agency over their lives and their communities.
Great, thanks, Senator.
Thank you,
and thanks, Reverend, for that question.
Thank you, Pastor.
So I'm gonna because I'm somewhat close to some of these issues locally in New Jersey, because as national director of the party, I hear from our members, they're in a fight for their lives, and they represent a lot of the grassroots folks who are trying to create politics that I think are in line with the values that you talk about in your campaign. And we have some of these power brokers, that have D's next to their names, but for example, Joe DiVincenzo runs an immigrant detention center, right? And George Norcross describes himself as a conservative Democrat and is a member of Mar-a-Lago, right? So I have two questions. That seems like a contradiction that you would associate yourself with folks who seem not in line with the values that your campaign has sort of lifted up. But also, when people ask you to give back donations from folks like that, do you understand where they're coming from, and would you consider giving back donations from people who are advancing a lot of right-wing right-wing strategies and sort of some of the policies and values that seem sort of not in line with what I think your campaign is about?
No, I think that's what I consider it. We actually give back lots of donations. We have a very good screen that says, is this person's job and work and whatever in line with our values? And that has made us give back lots of checks. Mm-hmm. But as a guy, again, a Jersey guy, I just want to describe when you live on a block where people are shot, mm-hmm. when you live in a community where the median income where I live is $14,000 per household in the 2010 census. And a lot of times we attack within our own party, we have these fights that as a guy whose job when I was mayor is delivering results, because people in my community who work full-time jobs and still have to use food stamps at my local grocery store that I talked about us opening, they can't allow perfect to be the enemy of the good, because we need lots of good and lots of progress. Mm-hmm. And so you use the guy's name, Joe DiVincenzo, who, I was one of the first people to say to him, I need to come to that detention facility. I'm going to send my staff there. And recently he's opened it up. He's invited activists to come and actually look at the facilities. Now, I'm one of these guys that wants to close detention facilities altogether. So we actually might not have an agreement on that issue. But when I needed help when I was mayor, our city in the middle of a recession was in an economic freefall, and we were facing decisions, no good decisions. Joe D was one of those guys that was there for me, that helped us get out of a lot of binds. When I had communities that desperately needed parks, you can go around Newark. We had the largest parks expansion in a century in our city during a recession. And it stabilized some communities. Mm-hmm. I could go through the things from housing that he was a partner of mine in, to education, our county schools now and our county college, the resources to turn around, going from scandal and corruption to expanding access for my kids. So I'm a guy that I've worked my entire life literally representing communities that other folks are afraid to come to, because they demonize and demean communities like mine. And when you're fighting and scrapping during a recession, especially when I was leading, unemployment rates, when the globe has a recession, inner cities have depression-like circumstances. And you find partners who may not align 100%, but deliver real results for your community, that's what I'm always going to do. I'm always going to be on the side of making progress for folks. So are there people to me that are part of the problem and need to get up out the way? Yeah. Are there people that I've declared, unlike a lot of other Democrats, I won't even take resources from? Yes. But this idea that we are using my disagreements on one issue as a way to demonize, take the totality of their career and make it all defined by that, there's something that I have a problem with that, like that. Where's the grace? And you and I talked before the camera started rolling about a need in our country to stand our ground, but still find common ground with people that we might disagree with. That actually we're falling into deeper tribalism in our country. And even within our own party, do you know what the Russians are doing? I've read the intelligence reports. They are literally using strategies to make Democrats hate each other. Because they know that's how we get weak. And so I have core principles, core values that I will not violate. But I'm in politics to fight for the people that often don't get at the table, the people who are demonized and denigrated, who face racism and bigotry. And my loyalty is with them. And so, yeah, some people might say, hey, Cory, you embrace strategies I don't necessarily agree with. But you know what? From education to healthcare, every metrics you can use in my community, we've gotten dramatically better. Because I was forced. I had a Republican governor. I could have held a press conference every day blasting him, and it actually would have helped my politics. But I had to build housing. I had to create jobs. I had creative ideas. That first urban farm we did was on state land. And I had to get laws changed at the state. I had to get the governor to sign off on those laws to create a national model for urban farming. So if you want somebody that is just going to say, I'm sorry, my way or the highway, that's probably not me. But I want results. If I'm your president and you are in one of those communities like I've spent decades fighting for, I will deliver results. I will get things done. I will improve your lives with you. And if you elect me president, I'm going to warn you right now. I'm going to ask more from you than has ever been asked from a president in your lifetime. Because there's too many people that think of, and this is not the Working Families Party, trust me, I know y'all not like that, but there are too many people that think, oh, if we just get this person elected, they're our savior. That's not why I'm running. When I knocked on doors in the Central Ward of Newark, running for city council, I told people, if you elect me city council, I'm coming back to your door. We did it, and it was cold out. This was in winter after I got elected, started working our way, knocking back through the doors to say to people, I told you before I was elected, I was going to ask for more. This is what I need. I need you to organize. I need you to become a part of the block association. I need you to come to this local community meeting. We are hurting right now from an impotency of empathy from what King warned us about during the heat of anti-white supremacist violence. He said what we have to repent for is not just the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, but the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. And so I unlike anybody else running for president, I have dedicated my life working in communities of color on issues and problems that people told me we could not solve. And we, not me, we made significant progress that now makes Newark on a lot of areas, something we don't even talk about. We were the first in New Jersey to do veterans courts and drug courts. We had the first office of reentry. We did things that became models for our state, in some cases nation, because we were practical minded every day. What can make life better for people in our communities? And so now we are at a point where our whole culture is in crisis. We face planetary peril right now. And the first people that will suffer on things like the climate crisis will be vulnerable communities like mine, where asthma rates are already 4 times higher than the suburbs. And so I don't have time for the kind of maybe intellectual purity that some people, the kind of purity that some people want. that wants to stiff arm anybody. To liberate thousands of people from prison, this may turn a lot of people off. But I just got a bill done that literally I took a guy to the State of the Union address who was a life sentence for crack cocaine weighing less than a baseball. You know how I had to sit down to get that bill done? Everybody from Chuck Grassley, people that we look as our most offensive opposition. I had to sit down and ultimately get things done. And by the way, that bill is nowhere near as far as I want to go, and will go if I'm your president. But when I walk my own block, I wish we were doing this on a walk around my neighborhood. And you see people coming out of their house and saying, hey, we sent you down there. You said you were going to do something. You did something. So-and-so came home. That's what we have to be focused on. At the end of the day, are we making life better? And the problem we have right now, and even the Democratic Party should be ashamed of this. The Democratic Party was part and parcel in mass incarceration. Part and parcel in getting that done. Trade deals that did not have labor or our environment at the center, that has turned off a lot of people from our party, we have to accept responsibility for that. Letting corporations gain more and more power in this country. Welfare reform, I can go through the things that I watched from my community go on. That's not who I am. And so I hope you understand, for those of you listening, I live with an everyday urgency. When I leave here, I go home to Newark, where Shahad Smith was shot on my block with an assault rifle. Where across the street from me is Integrity House, where I sit with the brothers sometimes in their circle. They tell me their stories. They've been incarcerated dozens of times before they finally got into drug treatment. My neighbors who have to ration insulin and literally end up in an emergency room because of this astonishing reality in our country, these are things that drive me every single day. And so you may say, Cory, you work with Joe D. Joe D is my friend. I work with Chris Christie, can write a dissertation on our disagreements, but I could text him right now. Because I'm sorry, I'm going to build working relationships with those people to advance the cause of justice. That's why I got in politics. And if I'm your president, I promise you, I will work with you and anybody else that will help move the ball down the field until I can turn and hand it over to some young folks and say that we didn't get all the way to our goal, which I believe we can, but we brought this country a mighty long way, and it's now your turn.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And so right now I think do we have a question from the Crowdcast? Yep. So we're going to take a question for the Crowdcast.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Let's see what's going on.
All right. This question is from Iris on Crowdcast. I'd like to hear what Mr. Booker aims to do to address the climate emergency we are in, specifically as possible. How can we push back against the fossil fuel industry, ban new fossil fuel infrastructure, and move along as quickly as possible?
I love that, and I want to get to specifics, but I want to just make a general comment.
Yep.
I hope when you are talking to your candidates, ask what they've been doing on this issue.
Yep.
Because when I was a mayor, there was another president that refused to join with international partners. This was the Kyoto Accords. And as a mayor, I realized, first of all, my community is suffering from this issue, and we need to make climate the lens with which we look at all our problems. So we started apprenticeship programs for our kids in Newark to do solar panel installation, environmental retrofits. I already talked about our prison reentry programs that started being focused on urban farming and tree planting. And I just think that we have to be a little more imaginative with the next president, and I hope it's me, to view every issue in America through a climate lens. And so, yeah, the things that a lot of people talk about rejoining the Paris Climate Accords, or I believe price on carbon, I believe that we have the fuel efficiency standards. I can talk about all that, but I want to tell you a little bit more imaginative on the things that we need to do. When I was mayor, we started looking at our procurement, because we're a pretty big business, $1 billion enterprise. We buy a lot of things. Yeah. And so we just said, well, we need to clean up our supply chain. When Walmart decided not to have antibiotics in their chicken anymore, which is something we should pass a law, by the way, on, every supplier had to change their practices. Well, we're bigger than Walmart, the federal government, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. We can force corporations to change, just say paying our bid specs. If you don't change your policies on carbon emissions or what have you, that's going to be something we weight in our bid specifications. International policy. I sit there on this watch in these forums where people applaud presidential candidacy for saying that rejoin the Paris Climate Accords. We should get no red badge of courage for getting back to something that we should have never gotten out of. But we need to start leveraging every international policy lever we have. From our hundreds of billions of dollars for foreign aid, which should be contingent upon what those countries are doing on the climate crisis. Our trade deals, labor and climate should be the two things. American workers and climate should be the two things at the center of any trade deal. We have a lot more levers than people think. And specifically to her question, this is something you can do if you don't have 60 votes in the Senate, because it has to do with tax policy. And the incentives, the incredible incentives we give to help these major corporations like Chevron pay no taxes. We give them lots of tax benefits to continue to do extractive industries. They have to stop. It just is so common sense. And we should be shifting those kind of tax incentives to renewable companies to accelerate their research and development, to accelerate their expansion, to accelerate the share of our energy that comes from renewables. We've really gotten to a point where, again, this is why we don't take corporate dollars, is because corporations have too much sway over our politics. And this is a great example of what oil companies are doing. And not just through direct campaign contributions. I mean, the Koch brothers are pouring so much money into ads and that like. And so that's why I liked one of your first questions about the intersectionality between all of these issues. Climate, we're not going to solve the climate crisis. And my friend in the Senate, Sheldon Whitehouse, talks about this all the time, about how this dark money is perverting everything from court appointments all the way to politicians, because the fossil fuel industries have gotten so good in perfecting their ability to change the politics in our nation. And we've got to fight back. We've got to fight back. And so for everything from voting rights to gerrymandering to campaign finance, all of these things are levers that we have to shift back in order for us to be able to empower us to do a lot of the bigger things on climate change, on healthcare, and more that have to be done. So for me, to your question, I will change laws, especially around tax laws and incentives, to stop the incentivizing of extractive industries. I will shift that to renewables, but I'm going to do a lot more than that to give us the power again to meet the urgency of the climate crisis, which by the time I walk into the White House in January of 2021, will have less than 10 years, not only to change this nation's practices, but we only produce 15% of the problem globally, but to begin to lead the planet out of this crisis.
Thank you. And thanks for the Crowdcast caller. So we're getting towards the end. I think we're at our last 15 or 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Time flies. And so I want to ask the last 3 questions, and then I want to give you the final 5 minutes to just kind of close us out. So let's try to do a little bit of a rapid fire. And if you could sort of answer as substantively as possible in like 2 minutes, and we'll see if we get through these.
Okay.
So the opportunity to join a union, no matter where you work, is the best way to raise wages, improve working conditions, and make it possible for us to provide for our families. Now, how will you use your executive, regulatory, and legislative authority to throw open the doors for millions more workers to join unions? And do you think we should have the right to reach citywide or industry-wide agreements?
So you're pulling from our policy plan, which is that there's lots of different ways to organize unions, and you could begin to think creatively about expanding unions across entire sectors of our economy. And we're going to be coming out with a lot of very specific plans on things like that. Right. But there's a lot of other common sense. I mean, we see the right to work states like we are in. I've already on legislation as a co-sponsor of legislation to deal with that. We have the horrible Supreme Court decision that gutted the ability for public unions to collect dues and to organize. I'm already fighting for legislation that would end that. We have this trend in America with the decline of unions and what's happened as a result of that decline of wages, as well as the growth in income inequality in our country. Unions are the solution to this problem, and we must have a president that fights back against people trying to undermine Davis-Bacon, against people trying to undermine the people who are organizing, that literally are trying to do unfair practices to bust unions before they organize, to break them up. All of that stuff, I'm going to be using every lever from the Department of Labor, Department of Justice even, as well as my bully pulpit to push the unionization of our country, because the data is very clear. A janitor in a union versus a janitor not, 15 to 20% difference in wages and benefits. We have people, again, like in my country, in my city rather, where I've marched on our airport with union organizers that show the outrageous reality that I have people in my city who clean the planes and, that fly around this country and do other work, but they don't get what accounts to a living wage for New Jersey. I've shown you in my street work, in my organizing, in my joining protests, and not only in my time as mayor and my time as senator, but even in this campaign, the fight for 15, one job should be enough. The kind of fights that are going on, they have to be elevated, and they have to, like some of the great trust-busting presidents of the past, the White House has to use their bully pulpit to change back our culture towards more unionization and towards more strength for American workers.
Great. Thanks for the answer. Next question, we're going to go back to our live stream. And so this is the last calling question. It's from WFP member and movement leader Maurice BP Weeks. So go ahead, Maurice.
Thanks, Mo. Senator, my name is Maurice B.P. Weeks, and I'm a native of Newark, New Jersey.
National Racial Justice Organization, but I'm appearing here in my personal capacity as a WFP member. Being from North Jersey, I know the power of the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry on New Jersey politics. And for the duration of your political career, you've been a top recipient of money from the healthcare and pharmaceutical industries. Your most recent election cycle to the Senate, that amount was about $223,000 alone. And now you seem to be doing a rebuke of the industry we heard earlier tonight and on the campaign trail just in time for your presidential run. My question is, given the current crises we're facing, from the need for better healthcare access to the drug addiction crises, would you now admit that your close relationship to the healthcare and pharmaceutical industries has been a mistake? And while I've appreciated your expansive answers here, I am looking for a yes or no answer on this question, Senator.
Well, Maurice, first of all, I want to let you know that you're a Newarker, so you know that since I was mayor, I was fighting to lower prescription drug prices in our city, and even piloted a program in the North Ward to do just that. So my urgency since I've been a mayor has been to lower prescription drug costs, because I saw the ravages of that not happening. You also know that we have a lot of people that work in our city that work for pharmaceutical companies, and some of them are everything from secretaries to lab assistants, and often they lump that money in as contributions from the pharma industry. But when people give me $5, $10, I've seen other candidates who have considered hundreds of thousands of dollars that isn't that corporate money. And so you know this. Before I ran for mayor, before I ran for president, before I considered running for president, we stopped taking corporate PAC money, and we stopped taking the pharmacist lobbyist money and all of that years before I ran for president of the United States. And as a presidential candidate, we don't take any of that money consistently as well. In terms of pharma C-suite executive money, their PAC money, their federal lobbyist money, none of it. But will I take money from somebody on my block or somebody in my community that just has a regular job? I'm not going to return that money at all, especially those low-dollar contributions of what we're running our campaign on.
Okay. Thank you, Maurice, and thanks, Senator, for the question. How are we doing on time? Okay, great. So we're down to our final five.
All right.
And again, I want to, on behalf of all of us here and our members, I want to thank you. You said before that you've never had an interview that you've walked away from.
Yes.
So you kept your streak consistent. So we want to give you the balance of this time, 5 minutes, in order to make your closing remarks to the folks on the live stream and our members.
When I first moved to Newark, I was a law student at Yale, and my family would always tease me, like my dad would say things like, "Boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. Life ain't about the degrees you get, it's about the service you give." And my family would always remind me that I moved into New Jersey. My family had their housing denied because of the color of their skin, and they actually had a white couple have to pose as them by activists who fought for our housing rights. And so the first thing I wanted to do was to go to the neighborhood I now live in and move into it and live in the community and be a part of what I thought was one of the more important struggles, but I still had a bit of an ego. And I'll never forget, in the high-rise project called Brick Towers in Newark that I eventually moved into, my first encounter with a tenant president who was really the leader in this community, I just walked up to her with this bit of too much swagger and just said, "Hey, ma'am, I'm here to help you," like I was some kind of savior. And she gave me this look of cynicism, like, "Boy, you need some help." and it was really one of these moments where I always say I got my BA or my JD from places like Yale, but I got my PhD on the streets of Newark from these incredible community leaders that took me under their wing and schooled me. And Miss Jones, is one of the first things she did to me was take me down to Martin Luther King Boulevard and say to me, "Well, if you want to help, tell me what you see." And I described the community of what I saw. This was one of the more dangerous intersections not just in Newark, but at the time, High and Spruce, Martin Luther King and Spruce was one of the more dangerous intersections, I'd say, in our state. And I said, "Okay, I see a crack house there." I started describing the neighborhood, and the more I looked, the more angry she looked at me. And she finally just said, "Boy, you can't help me." And she starts walking away, and I'm confused, so I run after her and I go, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, "Boy, you need to understand something, that the world you see outside of you is a reflection of what you have inside of you. And if you're one of these people who looks at my neighborhood and all you see is problems and darkness, despair, that's all there's ever going to be. But if you're stubborn like me and every time you open your eyes, you see hope, you see opportunity, you see love, you see the face of God, then you can be one of those people that helps me." And she left me there on the streets thinking to myself, "Okay, grasshopper, thus endeth the lesson." My whole experience in Newark, rising in politics in the city, was to trust people. And the tenant meetings and the organizing we did that took down the slumlord that used to own Brick Towers got convicted in federal court. And it was because we organized that community and showed the strength of our neighborhood. I would never have won against the machine in Newark if it wasn't for those tenant leaders who organized for me and walked me through their building vouching for me. And that's why I made a commitment that I would never leave the community, that I would stay with them through my time in politics. And it's more home now than any place I've ever lived. And it's taught me rarely to keep focused on the unfinished business of this country. But Miss Jones's original thing about sight and about vision to me is gospel. In fact, my faith says that without vision, the people will perish. And we've, in my opinion, have a vision issue in this country. And not only have we stopped having bold, dramatic changes in our country, we used to have these visions that we could defy gravity and go to the moon, that we could end poverty. Somehow that has slowed down in the courage of our vision, the defiance of our vision. And even more painful to me than that is how we view each other. As the enemy, as not a person with common cause. I always say patriotism is love of country. You cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. And love is not a sentiment. Love is saying that if your kids don't have a great public school to go to, then my kids are less off. If you can't get health care for your family, my dignity is under assault. This is a campaign about a lot of things, but I really think this is not a referendum on one guy in one office. It's a referendum on who we are and who we have to be to each other. Getting rid of Donald Trump is no big victory for my city because we had challenges before Donald Trump that nobody seemed to show enough courageous empathy about. Mass incarceration, shootings in our neighborhood, lack of access to health care. We have to get deeper in our culture than just removing one person from an office. I'm running for president because I think we need to reignite these highest ideals and to get power back into our grassroots. And that comes with responsibility, not to think that democracy is a spectator sport, but to get more engaged, to more active, to remember democracy is a verb. And if we can't get folk woke, then where are we? When 4 girls died in a bombing in Birmingham, this country got active. People from rainbow coalitions formed to end change laws. When women threw themselves out windows at the Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York and were dying on the streets, people rose up. Multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-geographic coalitions to change workers' laws. But now people shot in my community every day, nothing changes. People shot in a synagogue, in a church, at a concert here in Vegas, at a nightclub in Orlando. In schools, kids hiding under desks. And we do nothing, even though the majority of Americans, even those people that are different parties than us, agree we should be changing laws. And so a lot of this is going to come back to what kind of leadership, not individual, can we elevate from our grassroots that can be people that can reignite that civic grace, that can reignite that spirit of true patriotism, not the shallow kind of patriotism that's about putting people down or demeaning others and saying, you're not American, I am. We are all in this nation. And that defiance of poets of past, like Langston Hughes, who said, America never was America to me, but I swear this oath, America will be. This is that moment. This is that defining moment. And we are at a crossroads. And so whatever title I hold, this is the fight. And I will stay in the trenches in communities like mine, but reach out to rural communities and factory towns and all those people who feel right now that this America is leaving them out, leaving them behind, not including them. That is not a time to surrender to despair. It is time to fight. And that's the kind of fight we need to bring that creates a more inclusive movement for change. This is a movement moment. This is a moral moment. It is about the policy and the ideas, but it's also about the gut and the heart and the soul of our country. That's why I fight. That's why I'm running for president. And that's how I intend to lead this country. Thank you.
And that concludes this Q&A. Senator Cory Booker, thank you again for joining us and taking questions from WFP members, and good luck.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Maurice.
you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone joining us tonight. If you want to participate in further Q&As with other candidates to get updates on when and how to vote and who you think the Working Families Party should support, please text WFP 2020 to 738-674. Thank you and good night.